morning, ice creamers. Good afternoon, ice creamers, wherever you are. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? So, first time you've seen me back in the hat for a while. Obviously, you all know Laurence C. Gibbs. You've seen him on the Instagram. You've seen him, on the TikTok, whatever. We're going to be having a bit of a chat today, the first of many. We're going to be talking about Universal versus Hammer horror movies. Well, it's not really Universal versus Hammer because, I mean, look, it's a foregone conclusion. They're both fucking fantastic. But, right, yeah, but a little bit of personal taste there. So we're going to be talking about that. But before we get into it, Laurence, this is the first time they've seen the two of us together, right? Having a bit of a chit chat, right? So,
especially after... I was going to say, especially after we got separated at birth, I've missed you. I always wondered where the hell you were.
Well, actually, birth is one thing, but I was actually wondering about, when we were back in our previous life. We go back centuries, basically, the Napoleonic Wars, you name it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you tell the folks out there a little bit more about yourself, because they're going to be seeing a lot more of you moving forward.
Well, hell yeah, we're going to be doing a lot more for our Ice Screamer fans. This is going to be like the trend, from this point forward. Well, as you all know, I gave myself the moniker, the Horror of Horror. I had a previous incarnation offering on YouTube, and I'm all about just a play of words. I really am. I'm here in San Diego, California, for all my fellow Californians, and for all of those that go, we want to be there, but holy shit, we can't afford to live here. You know what? We do pay to live here. We really do. It's sad. But yeah, I've been in the industry for quite some time. I've been a part of different shows. I've done this, I've done that. But I joined Mr. Stephen Marshall here because him and I are kindred spirits on horror movies. Now, I have to admit, this son of a gun right here is a walking Wikipedia encyclopedia of horror. Me, I'm just a fan of horror. If it's horror, I pretty much love it. Well, like I said in the previous video, some of them I wish I could have gone my whole life without seeing. If I could have taken those hours back, I would. What can you say? I mean, there's those horror movies where you're watching, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna give this a try. And you hit the play and you're like, okay, just get through the 5 minutes. Just get through oh shit, an hour and a half and I watch this shit? What the hell?
The words deathbed, the bed that eats springs to mind for me for that one. Fuck
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, been doing this stuff for quite some time, and it's fun. It's Stephen, you gotta admit, it's fun being a part of this industry, man. We can just let our inner insanity just go wild.
Hey, nerd life is the only life. And just so for the guys out there, for the guys and girls out there, guys and ghouls, just so you know, we're going to be throwing up a beautiful interview Laurence had recently with William Shatner at San Diego Comic-Con. So going to throw that one up for you to see. You're going to love it. Let's jump right into this. Laurence, what was your, okay, so you know what? Hammer horror, Universal horror, it all comes back to childhood at the end of the day. We all had a certain entry point with one of those studios. I know my own, but I'm going to ask you, as a child, did you come in from Universal? Did you come in from Hammer? What was your entry point?
Well, Universal, grown up with the classics. But see, for me, and like you said earlier, it's not really Universal versus Hammer, because Universal really gave birth, even the afterbirth of Hammer horror. I mean, literally, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee embodied what was classic Universal and just reimagined it for the newer generation. So for me, both of them are just freaking awesome, and I love both. But there's something about Universal horror, because again, it was the predecessor. It is what launched monster movies and horror movies for the public, after the silent era, once the talkies, all right, we have that old, way back when we called it talkies, all right, it was talkies, not the sounds, that it was talkies. But I mean, it really had incredible, for me, the brilliant classic actors. I mean, come on, you had Boris Karloff, you had Bela Lugosi, you had Lon Chaney Jr., which he had huge shoes to fill from his father, Lon Chaney, known as the Man of a Thousand Faces.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what was your, did you, as a child, was it a Hammer movie you saw first, or was it a Universal? And which one? Do you remember specifically which movie you saw first?
Ooh, I remember watching movies till midnight. They used to have that. Stephen, you remember we had 5 channels way back in the day.
You got to remember, I'm from the UK. So
okay.
A little bit different for me. I know you guys
Okay.
had a lot of these things like what was it in New York? They had the $1 Million Movie or something like that in the afternoon.
Oh, yes, I remember. Yes, that's right. Right. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what was the first one I saw. First,
okay.
And if I'm gonna say first monster movie, it would have been King Kong. That was the first. But the first Universal of what we deem the kind of classic monsters, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, love that one. Yeah.
So fantastic. And I'll tell you something, I'm going to try and when I'm editing this together first to go live there, I'm going to try. There's a picture of me where I was, my God, I would have been 4 years old, and my mom and dad bought me one of these, the Aurora model of the Creature from Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
And what's that? The image with the guy with the touching the finger of God, that
was that Michelangelo?
Yes, right. That right. So there's a photo of me. My dad had painted this Aurora model, and I swear to God, if you can't see the future of this boy in that one picture, the model is there like this, and I'm touching the finger of the creatures and the look of glee on my face. But I digress. Yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon, man. I love that. And there's something about, I actually cried at the end of that when the creature, I always felt for the creature at the end of these films,
yeah. Well, just like with the Frankenstein's creation, Boris Karloff, you felt for him. He was a victim of circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's funny, I introduced my kids to the Creature from the Black Lagoon. We sat and watched it, and they adored it, And it's funny, I'm talking about it from a different, and I'm explaining this guy is not actually a monster. He is if they'd have just stayed out of his terrain, nothing would have happened. He'd have been hanging out. I mean, I'm sure he's glad he met Julie Adams, but yeah, that was my entry point.
Well, for mine, I believe it was Dracula with Bela Lugosi. I believe that was my very first one. And then before they lost the footage, London at Midnight with Lon Chaney, and then also Phantom of the Opera were some of my very first. And then obviously Frankenstein and The Mummy.
There's actually, I gotta pop back there to London After Midnight. There's and I'm waiting for confirmation, but I have a rumor that they may have actually found a copy of it might have turned up. So
thank God.
fingers crossed, man.
Yes.
Fingers crossed, because that's a beauty.
It is, yes.
And something interesting you mentioned when you mentioned Bela Lugosi, there's an interesting an interesting jumping off point with our Universal Hammer kind of thing. No fangs on Bela Lugosi.
Yes, that's true. And that's one thing that always perplexed me. Now, as a child, you really don't question. I think I did. I was like, okay, he's smiling, but where are the fangs? The interesting thing is after they shot the scenes from Dracula and they wrapped for the night, the Spanish crew would come in and film it for the Spanish audience. And the one who played Dracula, I forgot his name, he actually had fangs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I'm like, okay, so what's going on with Bela Lugosi? I mean, when he smiles, he's like this going in. You think he took his dentures out. He doesn't have his dentures in. It's like, dude, where's the fangs?
I got to tell you, actually, I'm, please don't kill me. I hope it's not a cardinal sin, but would you believe, and I've got the beautiful, my wife bought me the beautiful box set of all the Universal Blu-rays.
You lucky bastard.
I know I am a lucky bastard on multiple counts. But I gotta tell you though, man, like I've never actually, I've got to watch the Spanish version, and everybody says that it atmospherically, it actually is better than the Lugosi version. Have you watched it? Because I never have.
I've only seen clips because they never played that part, or they never played that version on American television.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. It really is.
Homework for both of us this October. We both got to watch it.
There you go.
Right?
Exactly.
I got no excuse because it's like literally in the other room, right? So I'm, so yeah, let's watch it. So, Bela Lugosi, no fangs, no blood. And then, obviously we get, we're kind of jumping backwards and forwards between the two studios, and that's okay because it's just a good chat here. But Christopher Lee, right now you've got Bela Lugosi. He's got the charm. He's got the, kind of
got the accent,
right? The accent and everything and stuff. Then, you've got Christopher Lee, where it's that charm is now substitute for that kind of raw sort of sexuality.
And the bestiality, the raw just fierceness and the raw animalism that Dracula had.
Yeah, right. And I you know what? Actually, I'm gonna actually sin a little bit and bring in something that's this is the argument. I don't know. Are you a big fan of? And if you are, cool. But are you a big fan of Gary Oldman as Dracula?
You know what? Funny that you bring that up. Francis Ford Coppola, when he did that movie, when it first came out, I was like, this is brilliant. I love it, how he did the special effects. He was experimenting. He was taking from, different movie, not really genres per se, but different movies of that time and some of the, up and coming directors on how their cinematography was. And he was just hodgepodging it. I loved Gary Oldman's portrayal, but the movie itself, and please forgive me as well, especially Mr. Keanu Reeves and Miss Winona Ryder, they could have cast somebody different. I mean, Keanu Reeves, even though I love him and he's a hell of a human being,
fantastic man,
fantastic man, he can't do a British accent to save his life, and it's just Keanu Reeves kind of playing Keanu Reeves, and then Winona Ryder.
So Laurence, tell me, how many properties do you have in England?
I've got a lot of.
Even it was a little bit like the Dick Van Dyke car, right?
Let me put it this way: if Keanu Reeves could actually do a British accent, it would have gone much better.
Do you actually? You know what? I gotta say though, as we're talking about this, because like what you said, and I do love Keanu Reeves in so many things, and he is such. I actually feel a bit bad now. Like I'm like, Keanu, if you're watching this, dude, we love you, man. Like seriously, we're not.
We do. We love you.
Like we really do. Like, fuck, I feel like an asshole now. But so the point. So getting back on track. The point I was going to make. So we had my point was I feel that I love Gary Oldman, but I just feel like they really mishandled Dracula in that film. Like the scene with Winona Ryder, it's like, and he's like, no, I can't make you drink. I can't. No, I want to. Like, if that would have been Christopher Lee, it would have been drink, bam. Like, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, he had that machismo.
Right, that power and that arrogance that it was missing for me. So I don't know, man. Christopher Lee scared the shit out of me as a kid.
Oh yeah, big time. Again, he had that monstrosity, that ferocity. He embodied literally the evil and the tyranny of Dracula, because again, Dracula, Vlad Tepes, based on Vlad Tepes, exactly. And there was that duality though. The history of Vlad Tepes, Dracula, son of the dragon, son of the devil. He was either a very benevolent, savior of Wallachia, modern day Romania, or he was the fiercest, commander or prince or king, whatever you want to call him, throughout the world. The Ottoman Empire feared him,
Yeah.
because he was so incredibly brutal on how he not only treated his enemies, but exterior enemies, but also interior enemies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was very fair, but you cross that line, God help you.
Oh, you were screwed. But
Oh
flat
yeah.
Taylor, right? The road was literally
Oh yeah.
bodies of these people that had crossed him
Mhm.
on spikes, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, now it's funny when we look at those films now, when you brought up Peter Cushing, who, God, man, what a wonderful actor as well. I mean,
Yeah.
those two guys, but it's amazing how we think of Christopher Lee, we think of Peter Cushing, Van Helsing, but they actually weren't in that many what was it, like 3 that they were in together in Dracula I mean, he's in the first one, The Horror of Dracula.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brides of Dracula, there's no Christopher Lee. It's one of Dracula's he's sort of subjects that's taken on. Now Peter Cushing's in it playing Van Helsing again, but there's no Christopher Lee. Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee don't come together again until Dracula AD 1972, when it's one of Van Helsing's descendants or whatever that's now. And then he comes back in Satanic Rites of Dracula, which is basically
I just watched. Yeah.
Did Satanic Rites?
I just was watching that a few nights ago, and I'll make my point in a minute. And I apologize for interrupting.
No apologies.
Back when we were talking about the Spanish version of Dracula way back in the day, that was more titillating than the American version. I mean, America was supposed to be, especially coming off of the Roaring '20s before was it the oh my God, the maturity rating, what the film rating, movie rating commission. America was supposed to be this free society, and stuff like that, but we're such prudes. We're such prudes. And the Spanish version was just like, fuck it. Hey, we're going to give you some titillation. And that's one thing that was beautiful about Hammer. Hammer, and wait, hold on. Stop. Hammer time. Whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, break it down. I've been saving that all freaking week.
You know what? You sprung it at the right moment. And you know what? I'm afraid we can't let you continue on this podcast.
Oh.
No, super valid point, because because Hammer's Hammer embraced it. It was blood and breasts and God knows, like they didn't hold back on anything, right?
Well, and the Satanic Rites, same thing. Within the first 10, 15 minutes, you see some really hot blonde chick getting sacrificed.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I want to say actually for the audience, we at Ice Creams do not condone the sacrifice of blonde virgins. So please,
not even brunette ones.
Yeah, absolutely, brunettes only. But what do kind of weird as well, but kind of cool, because when I was a kid, when we think vampires, I always used to think great to live forever, blah, blah, blah. And now as you get older, you start to think, man, one life is enough. I don't have the stamina for this. It's interesting in Satanic Rites to see this plot line where Dracula's trying to basically wipe out the human race to kind of take himself out. I mean, he could have just stood in the sunlight and gone, but trying to start an apocalypse, that's pretty fucking cool, really.
Yeah. And the 70s, again, really hip, like late 60s, early 70s type music and cinematography and the opening credits, and like they did this weird, like shadow of Dracula, and it was almost like a paper cutout. But again, the 70s was going really into experimental cinematography and opening credits. It was a product of its time.
Well, it's interesting because you got to think as well. I mean, and this is a conversation for a whole other podcast. But when you say about that, the 70s, I mean, Satanic Rites of Dracula, it's literally only about a year or two before Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that completely changed the game again, right? So there's a very short window. But listen, we could do a whole bloody podcast on Dracula, but you know, there's you know,
There's a
Universal
ton
and
of
there's mummies, there's Invisible Man,
yes.
there's Wolfman. Let's talk Wolfman. What's your are you a Wolfman, the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. guy, or are you more of an Oliver Reed? You know, what's the one? Curse of the Werewolf.
Mhm.
What resonates more with you?
Well, I love and appreciate both of them for what they are, and the different take on the Wolfman. Now, again, growing up in our era, you know, when you see the Wolfman, you see the great, and one thing I have to say about Universal Horror, Jack Pierce, aside from Lon Chaney Sr., was a special effects makeup. Well, it wasn't really special effects. He was a makeup guru. He was a monster makeup guru.
Yeah.
And it took hours to put the actors into makeup, you know, almost like the craftsmanship, the wizards of the past 30 years, where they go back to the basics and they actually perfect their craft. Watching it, the makeup back then, again, especially for Boris Karloff's as, you know, the creature, you know, again, Jack Pierce, I always wondered, because I thought, you know, as a young child, I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Okay, so vampires, Dracula have fangs on top, but the Wolfman, werewolves have fangs on the bottom. And I'm looking at my dog, I'm like, no, you got fangs on the top and bottom, don't you? So I always wondered about that, but still it was a classic because, again, that whole Universal mystique and directing and atmosphere, cinematography, and the classic stage type acting from those actors, because literally back then, you know, from the 20s and 30s, it was all these classically trained actors from the stage that were bringing it to life, and that's how they blocked it for filming. But Oliver Reed's portrayal as well, I love that both of the actors, Lon Chaney Jr. and Oliver Reed, brought that inner torture to life, and made us feel for their torment, their inner torment, made us feel for their characters, even though, yes, they're the beast. And just this is a commentary on society and allegory, if I get that, you know, term correct, that all of us have a beast inside of, but all of us are really good inside as well. And there's that torment, that battle. We're really not the horrific monsters. We're battling the good and evil within ourselves. And at the end of the day, we all want to be good. We don't want this beast to come out because we know the damage that the beast does.
That's, you know, that's a really interesting point, man, because you're right, because these movies as well, they're like, you know, they're an allegory for you know, addiction and, you know, alcoholism. And I mean, as such, I mean, I think not Lon Chaney, sorry, Oliver Reed in particular, because we all know Oliver Reed struggled terribly with alcohol addiction, right? Was a perfect foil for that role. There's an interesting thing here as well. We've picked up on something else where we talked about, you know, how you know, Bela Lugosi was that kind of charming vampire. Christopher Lee brought in the more animalistic, you know. Well, it's the same thing here with, I mean, when you look at Lon Chaney Jr., Larry Talbot, you know, this is a very charming man, you know, very tragic man. Oliver Reed again comes in more of that sort of raw, sort of animal kind of side to him, right? Larry Talbot, though, let's talk about Lon Chaney Jr. I don't know, I'll see how you feel on this, but I honestly think that character is almost like the ultimate tragic figure in cinema. I mean, he's such a good man that, you know, like really, like when he goes, it's like a piece of him dies, the actual guy, right? Like when he, and this brought us to, we're in this era now with the shared universe with the all the Marvel superheroes, and everybody's trying to have a shared universe. Well, Universal did that first. right? They had Larry Talbot came up so many times. We had Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. We had the House of Frankenstein, the House of Dracula, you know, and all these characters coming in.
Yeah.
Man, they were the first MCU. Crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's so many movies underneath, you know, Universal's belt. Again, Universal has been around forever, and I love the reboot of the, you know, what they were trying to do. The reboot of Universal Horror. Benicio del Toro and Sir Anthony Hopkins, you know, turn with the Wolfman.
Which got a lot of, you know, a lot of negative. I actually kind of like that film. I didn't think like
Yeah.
I don't look, is it as good as the original? Of course not, right? You know, you're talking about a truly iconic film that really sort of launched a genre, but it was a good film. And I mean, the makeup of the Wolfman himself, like that's a pretty cool looking freaking werewolf, right?
Yeah. Now it's funny, Sir Anthony Hopkins, he played Lawrence Talbot's father as he played Von Helsing in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. I was like, I go, come on, Sir Anthony Hopkins, you're better in this. Let's get a little diversity, shall we? I loved it for the attempt to reinvigorate the classics and its modern take on the Wolfman. Again, Benicio del Toro, you know, an incredibly accomplished actor. He again embodied that inner torment, that torture, that hurt soul, where his father just embraced it. He's like, "Fuck it, I'm the beast, and guess what? I'm gonna let the beast out and play."
This is and again going to, you know, again going to addictions and things. You've got the people that want to fight it and the people that just, this is who I am, this is what I, boom, right? I'm not gonna stop it. Let's go back to makeup for a second though, because you brought up Jack Pierce, and I mean, there's no way we can talk about horror makeups and like you said, this guy was a guru, he was a genius. We can't skirt over. It's interesting that when Hammer kind of took off there, and they were getting funding from Universal, from the US, right? Like, but Universal were so super guarded about those makeups, and we get right. We get the Curse of oh my goodness, is it the Curse of Frankenstein, the first one with Peter Cushing? I'm having a brain fart here.
I believe so.
I believe so.
Yes, Curse of Frankenstein.
Right, and now you've got this weird looking makeup on. I mean, which is, don't get me wrong, it's sinister. Christopher Lee was super creepy in it. But I remember as a kid thinking, that's not the way the monster looks, right?
Yes, I thought the same thing.
Right, like it's kind of, yet the film itself is superior on many levels to the from a story perspective. And as much as I love Colin Clive in the original Frankenstein, and I do, and people always go to that, it's alive scene, but I actually think his great moment is when they're talking about, someone says to him, "Oh, you're crazy," and he just looks at the camera and he's like, "I'm crazy." Well, you know, like it's like the look on his face, it's like beautiful, right? But but what do you think? Colin Clive, Peter Cushing, who's your favorite Frankenstein?
Again, it's hard to really, you know, not really, it's hard to compare the two or say Colin Clive versus Peter Cushing, because they both portrayed it as they felt it should be portrayed, and you know, the directing that they were receiving. Peter Cushing had that more aristocratic, you know, classic, because they took it back to the time period it should have been with Curse of Frankenstein. But you know, Colin Clive's was that modern day, so he was that suave, you know, well educated, you know, portrayal of you know, coming again from a aristocrat or American aristocratic family, even though it was supposed to take place over in Europe. Colin Clive's portrayal again was the more modern take, where Christopher Lee's was the classic in the era in which the novel was written. That I appreciated, because you know, for 1931's Frankenstein, Universal took, well, you know, we're somewhat into the past century, but somewhat into this new century. So he's, him and in the rest of the main characters are dressed more in the style of the 20s instead of the previous era in which the novel was written.
Absolutely.
And both portrayals were awesome, but I think I did appreciate Peter Cushing's play on the more classic aristocratic Baron von Frankenstein instead of Colin Clive's portrayal in how they portrayed it as just a modern, well-educated scientist that started dabbling in, quote unquote, the black arts to, make his creation.
Yeah.
But in both, I want to say, and I digress a little bit, in Universal's Frankenstein, as well as Universal's Dracula, my favorite character, and the one that I felt stole the show and the actor portraying it, was Dwight Fry's Igor. No, it was pronounced Igor. Well, they were wrong, weren't they? And as Renfield in Dracula, for me, he stole the show. I mean, I was mesmerized and fixated on him. Besides Boris Karloff as the creature, of course, but Dwight Fry in both movies stole the show.
It was fantastic. I would 100% agree on the Renfield. I mean, he was fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
But you're a bad man. You're taking this back to Dracula. Bad.
Sorry. True.
Bad
True.
Laurence.
I know.
I'm gonna throw an out of left field question at you. Why? Okay, so obviously, we had Universal, we had the Dracula, we had the Wolfman, we had all the mummies. These are all things that Hammer took and ran with.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Hammer never had a crack at the Creature from the Black Lagoon?
You know what? That's actually a damn good question. And speculation, of course, maybe because it was such one of a kind that it would have been hard to top that. Mm. Again, Hammer just took what was wonderful about Universal Horror and just turned it up a notch. They really did, and catered to the more modern audience, because at that time, again, how old we were, and our couple generations before this, how old they were, especially with the horrors that were going on in the world, obviously, especially after the Second World War, and you have Korea, Vietnam, what have you. The classics were loved for what they were, but they weren't horrifying to the modern audience as they were back then, because this was, again, it was all brand new back then. So people were literally terrified. I mean, you heard the stories, and I don't believe it was all just the hype, but again, the hype is everything when it comes to promoting anything in entertainment. But people actually were fainting in the theater, especially when the creature played by Boris Karloff was first introduced.
Yeah, I heard that.
That was horrifying. But the modern audiences, we were so numb to the horrors of humanity that they needed something more, Hammer horror, to shock and go, holy crap, oh my God. They needed that because the audience at that time were more mature and demanded more.
And like you say, coming out of World War II, I mean, my God, I mean, and even if you weren't on the battlefield, London in particular, obviously me growing up in the UK, right? I mean, it was bombed like crazy, right? They were, yeah, you're right. They were. I'm going to give you my take, and again, it's speculation. I wonder if the reason they didn't tackle the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and this just occurred to me last week watching it with my kids, that costume, that creature costume really is pretty fucking amazing. It stands it stands the test of time. Even watching it now, I'm like, yes, it's I think, was it Rico Browning in the costume, or
and he was actually a Olympic diver,
right? So watching it now, I'm like, I know that that's a guy in a costume, but it's so bloody convincing that I can watch it and still say, oh my God, that's a creature. Now, I'll tell you this, in growing up with the original Doctor Who in the UK and stuff like that, one thing we didn't do well is we were we played to our strengths in the UK. We were great. We're great with drama. We're great with stories. We're great with characterization. Special effects, not so much. And I mean, if you've ever seen the UK tried to compete with Godzilla, they did a movie called Gorgo.
Yes.
Thing, it really, it's pitiful. It looks dreadful, right? You know, I mean, I could get it. I passed muster when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, that's not, you know. So there's almost a point to me that wonders if they had said, you know, I don't think we're going to be able to. The costume's going to look pretty shit, or maybe they even tried. I don't know, but
yeah. Well,
that's my speculation anyway. For what's
well, no, both of our speculations are spot on. I mean, again, Universal broke, pun intended, virgin ground.
Yeah.
And again, the absolute incredible prosthetic makeup effects were second to none.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you had the master, you had the wizard, you had the godfather of prosthetic makeup, Jack Pierce. And he, just like Lon Chaney Sr., held his secrets close to the chest.
Yeah.
Because he was so freaking brilliant. And I don't know if you could have made, especially, you know, with you know, Hammer back in the 60s and 70s, or even the late 50s, because Hammer got his start in the late 50s, like 1958, right?
Well, I think they actually started before that, but they were doing a lot of, I mean, I know they did a lot of early movies like Spaceways. The first sort of drama, like kind of genre attack was, I think, Spaceways, which was basically a crime drama, but with a little bit of a sci-fi twist to it. But yes, around 58 was where they kind of hit on the horror, and then it was like boom, and then that was really what defined the studio moving past that, right? And right through till did you ever see, you know, I was just going to say to the early 70s, but in the late 70s they did an anthology show, Hammer House of Horror. Did you ever see that?
Yes,
I fucking loved that. That creeped the shit out of me as a kid.
Yeah.
God, me and my sister missed that. We were like creeped right out.
Oh God, yeah. Well, just like Rod Serling's The Night Gallery. Now, both of us grew, again, both of you and I are the same era. I mean, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, forget about it. I kind of sound like a mafia guy. Hey, did you do that thing? Yeah, I did that thing. You know, that thing. Forget about it. But again, going back to the classics, breaking virgin ground, they still have not been able to recreate that magic. It is difficult. It is almost impossible to recreate that spark, that lightning strike of brilliance. It really is. And going back to the Creature of the Black Lagoon, the makeup effects from Hammer Horror, aside from, and I will admit this, aside from what they did for Christopher Lee's turn as the creature, it just wasn't up to par. And there was no way for them to recreate that incredible creature suit for the Creature of the Black Lagoon.
Well, yeah. And I mean, even when, I mean, another thing that kind of speaks to that is when Hammer did The Mummy. And don't get me wrong, I love The Mummy. I thought it's a great film. But when you look at The Mummy himself compared to, you know,
Boris
Karloff and you know, Tom Tyler and these people, like when their chorus were menacing, freaky, really well done creatures, where, you know, the Mummy, and I mean, they even kind of like when he comes out of the mud in the beginning, I almost feel, and again, this could be speculation, but I almost feel like they deliberately had that thing fall in the mud so that he could look muddy and it could kind of gloss over some of the shortcomings of the actual mummy costume itself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. They couldn't, there was, and that was the thing with Hammer, is where they couldn't do those things. You'll notice what I say about the UK is they play to their strength. They play to the characters. They play to the really great stories. they make damn sure they've got the right. I mean, there's a reason they kept going back to Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and Donald Pleasance and all these people, right? Because they were just great.
Oh yeah, they were brilliant actors. They portrayed their characters incredibly well. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing still stand the test of time. I mean, for what they accomplished, they were brilliant. And Christopher Lee, God bless him, had a wonderfully long and vibrant career spanning decades. And if you say Christopher Lee, people still remember him. Thank God. Peter Cushing, unfortunately, not so much, which is tragic because Peter Cushing was a brilliant actor as well. I think the last thing he did was the very funny parody movie Top Secret with Val Kilmer.
I love that.
I love that movie.
I love
absolutely funny as hell. But I believe that was Peter Cushing's last movie before he passed away.
Yeah, that would stand to that would kind of match up. Christopher Lee, going back to Christopher Lee for a second, and I know this is probably did you know he was Carpenter's first choice for Loomis?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Did you know that Christopher Lee was John Carpenter's first choice for Loomis?
No, I did not.
He originally, he tried desperately to get Christopher Lee, and for whatever reason, Christopher Lee turned it down, and obviously Donald Pleasance came in. This is just a brief aside anecdote, I apologize. But years later, Christopher Lee was at a party with John Carpenter, and he famously said to him, "You know something? I should have done your movie. I should have done Halloween." But again, side note.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Christopher Lee in a rare Hammer heroic role, The Devil Rides Out. Where
oh my God, I haven't seen that since, holy shit, since I was, I think, 6-7 years old, maybe.
Captain Kronos, the vampire hunter.
Oh my God, I forgot about that one. Yes. Oh my God. Oh,
that's funny, because they even mixed a little bit of a sci-fi kind of edge into that story as well. And that a franchise. I've never understood why there were no sequels to that. You know? Centered around this swashbuckling vampire hunter with the sword, and he's got his sidekick, and there could have been it almost could have been the 70s Blade before Marvel introduced sort of Blade to the to the mix there. Yeah. But let's talk about Invisible Men.
Oh, Claude Rains, the Invisible Man. Yes.
What's your feeling on the Invisible Man, and do you think that any later attempt at that character has been successful?
None have been successful. They've for me, they've all sucked, with the exception of Kevin Bacon's Hollow Man.
It's that whole thing of what can you do when you no longer have to look at yourself in a mirror, right? Yeah. So I agree with you. I'm not a big fan of the one thing about the Hollow Man. I'm not a big fan because it was that point where they were really moving into the let's computerize everything, and the effects were starting. But but zeroing it into Kevin Bacon's portrayal, I don't think you're ever going to make a movie where Kevin Bacon's the weak link. He's so good.
No, you can't. Kevin Bacon commands a role. He does. You cannot make him the weak link. But even if you try, he's going to outshine the rest of the cast, unless you put other brilliant actors from not only his era, but the previous eras in it. Then it will truly be an ensemble cast. But to try to make him the weak link, no.
So we've gone Invisible Men, we've done Creatures from the Black Lagoon, we've done Mummies, we've done Werewolves, we've done Dracula. We have not done the Phantom of the Opera because Hammer took a stab at that as well with Herbert Lom.
Yes. I wasn't a big fan of that. I wasn't, because again, it's hard to recreate the magic of the classics and the heart and soul that Lon Chaney not only put into his makeup effects. Again, secretive makeup effects. No one's been able to recreate it. I mean, some of them have come out on how he did some things, but not everything. He had it down to a scientific craft. Hubert Lom and just the whole cast and the scripting and directing fell short, incredibly short of the original.
I feel like the
Yep.
story goes off the rails as well in the second half.
The only thing that came close, Phantom of the Paradise.
Ah! Oh my God.
I somewhat mean that in jest, but again, for Paul Williams, take his stab at it. It was, I mean, again, a product of the 70s. It was brilliant. The musical portion of it, again, written by Paul Williams. I loved it. I mean, it's a cult classic. Everybody in our generation and, you know, our you know, like siblings generations. I mean, come on, it spoke to it, and it was just incredibly fun to watch. It was. But again, back to our original question and statement. Everything else after Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera can't even be touched. They just fell flat. They were horrible.
Was it Gerard Butler that was in was it him in the movie version of Lloyd Webber's Phantom?
That pissed me off. That pissed me off. Oh, I hate when Broadway gets a hold of stuff and just fucks it up. You don't make a musical out of classic horror movies. Quit fucking trying to make a musical out of everything.
I hate it for completely other reasons. I hate it because I fucked my hand up. We had it on, my ex-wife had it on the TV, and there's all these songs, and I'm doing all these like grandiose gestures to the songs, and I was making something in the oven, chicken nuggets or something, and I'm doing all this grandiose stuff, and I fucking burned my hand on so I've sworn never ever to watch that again. But we're kind of coming up close to the hour. So there's something I do really want to talk about, and I want to ask you your opinion. You know, Hammer kind of, you know, they obviously, they died out when they, you know, sort of their last kind of gasp was sort of in the early 80s when they did Hammer House of Mystery and Suspense, which was like another, not Hammer House of Horror. This was like they did stories that there was a few horrors in there, but it was also espionage and God knows what. But then but after years of trying out kind of, so they got going again, right? And we got, you know, I think it was it what was that one with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, the Tenant or the Resident? I'm trying to remember. But then they did the Daniel Black, the woman in
yes,
Daniel Radcliffe, the woman in black.
That was beautiful. Love that one.
And they had their hands in Let Me In, which was the remake of the Swedish Let the Right One In. And I gotta say, this is one of those cases where, don't get me wrong, I love the Swedish version. I really do.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But I actually think that Let Me In was actually a tad better because I liked Chloe Morris and Cody Smith McPhee. I thought they were perfect. Yeah. So I guess my question to you is this: now that they've done these things and they seem to finally be, do you think Hammer Studios will ever have the same kind of acreage in the movie industry as they did back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s?
If they keep with the modern ones like that you mentioned, Let Me In, the Woman in Black, and what was the other one? I'm sorry.
So Let Me In, the Woman in Black, and the other it was, and I'm gonna apologize. It was either hang on, let me just Google it while we're on here. It was either The Resident
is our friend Ice Screamers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Hilary Swank, and I watched it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm trying to I think it's the Tenant, but I could be wrong. The thrust of it was she moved into a place.
Yes.
He was a neighbor. He seemed like a charming man. Like, she'd come out of a bad breakup. They went out on a date together, and it was kind of nice, and he was good. And then for one thing or another, she kind of realized, now this is not for me, and he's not happy, and he doesn't take it well. And then we start to find out he was actually stalking her before, finding out things about her. Yeah, and it's super creepy. But yes, so that was the other one. So what do you think? You think if they stay on that path?
If they can get writers and directors and actors to continue that avenue where, again, those were wonderful movies, brilliantly done. The thematic effects, the cinematography, and the overall atmosphere, if they can continue with that, reinvigorate that, then I would welcome the resurrection of Hammer Horror.
Yeah, and I mean they seem like they're on their way. And there's been talk for many years that they were going to do like they were talking about doing like another version of, I mean, they had done Quite a Mass in the Pit, which was obviously the version of the British TV series, but they were talking about doing that again. And I often thought to myself, that's something that would be great to be brought to a new audience now. Here we go. It's the Resident. That's
Oh,
it.
the Resident. Yes.
Not the
Yes,
Tenant. I
Resident.
apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Yes,
Myself as well.
With Hilary Swank, and Christopher Lee actually had a small part in that as like another tenant on the floor, on their same floor. He comes into it. So, but listen, we're on the hour. This has been wonderful. We could have gone 2-3 hours. Like,
oh hell yeah,
to talk about.
Easily.
But listen, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be doing a lot more of these. The next one we're going to be talking about is the Disney's The Black Hole. And the question is, was this the most important movie that Disney ever made? You have your opinions. Laurence will have his opinions. I have my very strong opinions on this. And that's what we'll be talking about next. So, Laurence, would you like to say anything to the audience as we head out for the day?
Well, as always, ice screamers, keep screaming.
He said it better than I did. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.
Take care, everybody.